Knock knock. Welcome to the state debate, where every question is real, every answer is layered, and all the guests are me. Today's question challenges the difference between legal citizenship and felt belonging. It asks whether existing in the Republic is a right, a privilege, or a performance. The question is, what do we need as a people to exist in our society of the Republic of South Africa? Joining us in our panel today, the historian and the economist. They debate for national coherence and argue the idea that there is a minimum set of needs, such as infrastructure, recognition, and protection, that the state must deliver to render citizenship meaningful. Also joining us today, the psychologist and the ethicist who resist essentialism. They argue that need as a concept is a political construct often shaped by whoever controls the narrative of what it means to exist properly in society. First up, speaking for the central argument, the historian. To exist meaningfully in the Republic of South Africa requires more than documentation. It requires historical repair. Citizenship was extended after 1994 without dismantling the architecture of exclusion. Its promise is still haunted. Land was never restored, economic apartheid was never undone, and the access to the state remains deeply unequal. The state owes its citizens more than the right to vote. It owes them the ability to live. And that begins with provisions of infrastructure, housing, water, electricity, healthcare, education. The absence of these things isn't just logistical, it's symbolic. It tells people that they are unseen. Still. Ladies and gentlemen, the economist. And when you look at the numbers, you see the betrayal. We've built an economy where people are expected to survive, not participate. Dignity has become a luxury. GDP might be rising, but that doesn't mean the people are. We call it resilience when we keep poor people hustling, but it's not resilience, it's abandonment. If your family must become your welfare, your state, your bank, your security, your government, then the Republic has already failed you. Citizenship cannot be a ceremony. It has to be material. A minimum must exist. Without that, the state is just a landlord, and most of us are still paying rent on land that was stolen from us. Ladies and gentlemen, speaking against the central argument, the psychologist. But who defines what we need in order to exist? And who defines what it means to exist properly? Belonging isn't just about infrastructure or income, it's about identity, safety, and meaning. And when the state withholds recognition, people don't always blame the system, they begin to question themselves. That's how domination works. It gets internalized. You're told you're equal, but you live daily in inequality. And then you think the problem is you. The real trap is expecting the state to give you your humanity. What happens when it refuses? What happens when it never meant to? Ladies and gentlemen, the ethicist. That's why I don't trust the idea of need. It sounds neutral, but it's not. It's constructed by power for power. And when the state tells you what you need, it's really telling you how to behave. If you comply, you get help. If you dissent, you get cut off. The provision of services becomes a leash. You're fed just enough to keep you dependent. I'm not interested in a minimum. A minimum is a ceiling they can lower whenever they feel threatened. I'm interested in sovereignty, not survival on their terms, but existence on ours. Dignity should not be a reward. and I refuse to perform worthiness just to be allowed to breathe. And that marks the end of round 1. We are going into round 2, the rebuttals. Ladies and gentlemen, the historian. We've seen this before. The state creates visibility, then uses that visibility as proof of inclusion. In the 1950s, they gave us Bantu education and called it reform. In the 1990s, they gave us votes and called it freedom. Today, they give us service delivery protest and call it engagement. But symbols are not substance. You can't measure progress by the number of speeches made at funerals. What I'm saying is the state has always performed the appearance of care while outsourcing the cost of survival to the people. This past is not past. It just keeps writing itself in softer fonts. I hear the concerns about control, and yes, services can be weaponized, but absence is a weapon too. You can't ask people to build sovereignty from starvation. This is not theory, it's RDP houses turned to dust before the loan is paid off. It's children walking 5 kilometers to schools with no roof. We talk about dependency like it's a moral failure. Dependency is engineered. You keep people on the edge so they can never organize long enough to threaten you. I'm not arguing for the perfection of the state. I'm arguing for the minimum necessary so people have enough ground to stand on before they even begin to challenge it. We keep pretending that structural abandonment is an external fact, but it's an internal weather. People don't just live in informal settlements, they live in informal identities patched together from media headlines, empty promises, and shrinking dreams. When the state disappears, it doesn't vanish, it echoes inside. It becomes a ghost that whispers, maybe we were never meant to exist in the first place. And the more you believe it, the more you contort. Dignity becomes mimicry, hope becomes performance, and eventually survival itself starts to feel like betrayal. They will always give you just enough to keep you negotiating. First, they fracture your reality. Then they offer you bandages with expiration dates. That's how you know the architecture of control is laid. It starts with a promise, hides the price, and ends in debt. Look deeper. Every minimum the state offers is wrapped in a moral transaction. Behave, conform, be grateful, and if you refuse, you become unworthy. This is not care, this is calibrated mercy. The kind they can revoke at any moment and still call themselves just. But here's the truth. Anything they can take from you was never freedom to begin with. And that marks the end of round 2. We're going to get into the closing argument, which is the final round. Closing argument for the central argument, the historian. History doesn't repeat, it remembers. And what it remembers is how easily people confuse visibility for justice. My argument stands. For citizenship to mean anything in this republic, it must be backed by structural provision. Water, shelter, safety, recognition, not as favors, not as trophies, but as reparative rights. Without those, the word citizenship is just another relic we use to decorate inequality. The closing argument for the central argument, the economist. You cannot build a society on bootstrap myths when you've stolen the ground. A functioning republic must meet a basic threshold of infrastructure, dignity, and protection. Otherwise, we're just economic hostages with ID numbers. I'm not defending the state, I'm indicting its economy. If you want people to participate in building a future, you have to give them the tools to survive the present. A closing argument against the central argument, the psychologist. Need is not just material, it's psychic. You can't legislate wholeness. The state offers provisions, then calls them peace, but people are breaking in places the state does not measure. Belonging is internal weather shaped by social climate, and until the Republic stops haunting its people with the burden of proving they deserve to exist, every provision will feel like a trick mirror reflecting what we should be, but never what we are. The closing argument against the central argument, the ethicist. What they call minimum is a ceiling designed to keep you low. They want your dignity to depend on your obedience, but I do not believe in state-sponsored humanity. I believe in a kind of freedom that is not conditional. No leash, no permission, no price. If the Republic requires you to suffer in silence to qualify for care, then the Republic itself is a performance, and I refuse this script. You've heard the debate. One side argues that the state must deliver a set of minimum provisions to render citizenship meaningful. The other asks whether that minimum is a mirage, a trap of dependency dressed as care. But perhaps the deeper insight is this. In the Republic of South Africa, the line between survival and sovereignty is still being negotiated. Daily, painfully, invisibly. Every question we ask on the state debate is not just about politics, it's about power, about who gets to be visible, who gets to belong, and who decides what it means to exist at all. Thank you to our panel, the historian, the economist, the psychologist, and the ethicist. All of them, me. Next time on the state debate, in learning to communicate, what does effective communication look like? Until then, knock knock.